I hadn't missed a Sunday dinner in 12 years. Not once. Not after working 70-hour weeks. Not after pulling double shifts during tax season. Not even after that winter I got the flu so bad I could barely stand. My mother, Susan, always said I was the dependable one. The daughter who remembered birthdays, who brought dessert, who showed up. That evening, I drove the 40 minutes to my parents' house with a lasagna dish still hot on my passenger seat. I'd made it from scratch, the kind Dad Michael liked, with extra cheese and no ricotta. The smell of garlic and basil filled the car like memory. That smell always meant home. Their porch light was on when I arrived, pale yellow against the dusk, the kind of light that made you think someone was waiting for you. I parked out front, careful not to block James's driveway spot. He was my older brother, always got the spot closest to the house. I climbed the stairs with the lasagna warm in my hands, a familiar rhythm. Left-right pause on the third step because it creaked. I didn't knock right away. I was reaching for the screen door when I heard my name. Caroline won't be a problem. She never says no to family. It was Michael's voice, flat, certain. I froze. My hand stayed suspended near the handle. Inside, voices bounced off kitchen tiles. Mom. Susan sounded strained. But 300,000. That's insane, James. How did you even— It doesn't matter how James said sharply. What matters is that I need it handled before the audit goes deeper. You said you'd help. Then Michael, again calm, decided. We will. Caroline's got that promotion. Remember senior analyst at that big firm? She's probably making, 150 now. The dish in my hands didn't shift, but something in me did. I stayed completely still, as if moving might make it worse. The screen door pressed cool against my arm, the lasagna slowly losing heat between my fingers. Inside, the conversation kept going like I didn't exist. She mentioned something about bonuses, James added. Probably more than 150. My mother sighed. She works so hard. Always has. There was a pause. Then Susan's voice, softer now, like she was convincing herself. We'll say it's for the roof. The house has been leaking. We can start there. 30,000 maybe. Then later, medical bills. I'll say I need some procedures. James didn't even let her finish. Spread it out. She'll give it. She always gives. Remember the business loan. 20 grand. No questions. Never asked for it back. She gave us her signing bonus, Michael said, like it was a point of pride. 40,000. Just handed it over. James laughed. Who does that? She still thinks we're a real family. It's almost sad. Susan didn't laugh. Her voice came back brittle. Don't talk about your sister that way. She's naive, Mom. She thinks showing up with a damn lasagna means something. I couldn't move. Couldn't blink. I saw it clearly myself on this porch, again and again, arms full, heart open, never once suspecting I was being drained. Michael's voice was calm again. We'll space out the requests. Caroline can't say no when you cry. That always works. I don't like lying to her, Susan said quietly. It's not lying, James replied. It's family. Her money is family money. She doesn't have kids, doesn't have a husband. What's she spending it on anyway? That apartment. The apartment I had poured everything into. The one with the view of the park and a front door that locked. The only place I called mine. She'll be fine, Michael said, final as a gavel. She always handles things. That's what she does. Are you sure there's no other way? Susan asked. James's voice dropped. Unless you want me in federal prison for tax evasion and fraud. No, this is it. My lawyer says if I can pay it back before they dig deeper, they'll drop it to civil penalties. Tax evasion. Fraud. My brother. The one they bragged about to cousins, co-workers, strangers at the grocery store. He wasn't just struggling. He was criminal, and they were going to make me pay for it. I stepped back from the door, slowly, careful not to creak the step. My hands were slick with sweat. The dish nearly slipped. I caught it. No sound. No trace. I couldn't let them know I'd heard. I made it back to my car without falling apart. That surprised me. My legs felt disconnected, like I was floating just above the pavement. The lasagna sat on my lap like a joke I didn't get anymore. I didn't drive off right away. Just sat there, engine off, listening to the faint buzz of summer bugs and the occasional passing car. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Text from Susan. Where are you, sweetie? Dinner's ready. My thumb hovered. Then I typed, sorry. Got called into work. Emergency audit. Rain check. 3 dots blinked. Then came her reply. Oh no, we have something important to discuss. Can it wait? She was going to say it. The roof. Just like they planned. Sorry, Mom. Boss says it's urgent. Love you. I didn't drive home. Not yet. I just drove. City lights, gas stations, places that didn't know me. I needed motion, not arrival. By the time I finally pulled into my apartment garage, the lasagna had gone cold. I left it on the passenger seat and walked up with empty hands. Inside, I didn't turn the lights on right away. I stood by the window watching the night filter through tree shadows and felt something crack open inside me. Not anger, not yet, just a tired kind of clarity. I had given them $40,000 the year I graduated, then lived on ramen and cheap coffee until I could save again. I gave James $20,000 when his business collapsed. I paid for their anniversary dinner when they said they were tight. I never once asked for a penny back because I thought that's what daughters did, what good sisters did, what family did. But now I understood something I hadn't before. They never saw it as generosity. They saw it as compliance. By the time I went to bed, a plan had started to form. Quiet, sharp. I wasn't going to tell them I knew. Not yet. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I made moves. I sat down at my desk and opened every account I had, checking savings investments, even that old 401k from my first job. I transferred every cent to new banks, ones my parents didn't know. I called each customer service line, set fraud alerts, froze every joint point of access I'd ever shared. Then I changed every password, 2-factor authentication, recovery questions, all of it. My phone rang non-stop. Mom, Dad, James. I didn't answer. Instead, I emailed my boss, Emily Thompson, and asked if she had a few minutes. The subject line was simple, personal, urgent. Emily was a sharp woman in her 50s. No kids built like someone who'd walked through fire with heels on. When I stepped into her office, she didn't smile, just gestured to the chair. I need advice, I said. Not legal, not yet, just personal, but it might affect my work. She nodded. Go on. I told her everything. The conversation, I'd overheard the money I'd given over the years, James's fraud, the plan they made my plan to vanish financially speaking. She listened the whole way through. Arms crossed, her expression growing darker by the paragraph. When I finished, she leaned forward. First, she said, you're handling this better than most. Second, you need a lawyer. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they might try to twist that. Third, you need a record. Every dollar, every ask. Document everything. I opened the spreadsheet I'd started the night before. 5 years of transfers, dates, amounts, notes in the margin, like James's emergency and Mom's medical bill. Emily whistled low. That's nearly $200,000. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat felt tight. Then she looked at me, something soft in her voice. Now one more thing. We've got an opening in our Chicago office. Same title, better pay. And most importantly, a state between you and this mess. Chicago, I repeated. You wouldn't be alone, she said. You'd have support. We'd handle your visa, the move, everything. I didn't answer. Not yet. But something in me shifted. That afternoon, James finally got through. I don't know why I answered. Maybe I wanted to hear how he'd spin it. Jesus, Caroline, he said. Where have you been? Working, I said flat. At that job, you think Prince money. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm busy. What do you want? We need to talk as a family. Dinner tomorrow. Can't. I have plans more important than family. I didn't hesitate. The kind where people don't scheme to steal $300,000. There was silence on the other end of the line. I don't know what you're talking about, James finally said. Tax evasion fraud. You were going to let me pay for it. He laughed too loud, too forced. You were listening. I was bringing lasagna, I said. Remember that family dinner? That thing you said I foolishly still believe in. Caroline, listen. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You planned it. You told them to cry if they had to. You called me naive. I'm in trouble. You should have thought of that before you broke federal law. You're seriously going to let me go to prison over money you can afford. I closed my eyes. I couldn't afford the 40 grand I gave Mom and Dad. I couldn't afford the 20 I gave you. I couldn't afford any of it. But I gave it because I thought that's what family did. Silence heavy, like he didn't know where to go from there. I'm begging you, he said. Then beg someone else. I hung up. The texts started immediately from James, from Mom, from Dad. I didn't read them. Wednesday, I got a knock at the office lobby. It was Susan. She looked older than I remembered. Her hair was undone, her eyes red. She didn't wait to be buzzed in, just rushed past security and found me by the elevators. Caroline, please, just talk to me. I stood there in the marble lobby of my firm in a navy blazer and heels while my mother cried like a child. We can talk, I said. Right here. She flinched. Can't we go somewhere private? No. James is in trouble. I know. Fraud, tax evasion. He told me he made mistakes, but he's your brother. No, he's your son. You help him. We don't have the money, you know that. Then maybe he shouldn't have committed a felony. Her voice cracked. How can you be so cold? This isn't like you. You're right. The old me would have already written the check. The old me thought love meant sacrifice. The old me believed you when you said family helps family. She looked up confused. What are you saying? I'm saying the old me died on your porch. That stopped her. You don't mean that. I leaned closer, voice low. You said I wouldn't say no. You said I don't understand how the real world works. You said I turn to pudding when you cry. Real tears now, not performative ones. Real fear. We were desperate. No, you were greedy. There's a difference. She reached out. I stepped back. I left her there in the lobby under the gold letters of my firm's name. I didn't look back. Thursday came and went in silence. No calls, no texts, no surprise drop-ins. For a moment, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe they'd finally understood. Friday afternoon, I was packing up my desk when the receptionist called. Caroline, there's someone from legal downstairs, a process server. Says he has documents for you. I froze, then exhaled slowly. Send him up. He handed me a manila envelope. No eye contact. No words, just a scribbled name and a quiet exit. Inside a formal complaint. My parents were suing me, claiming the money I'd given them over the years were loans that I was now demanding repayment and had caused them emotional distress and financial instability by cutting off contact. It was absurd. So absurd I laughed right there at my desk. Not a sharp laugh, a hollow one. The kind you let out when disbelief finally gives up and lets exhaustion take over. They weren't just trying to guilt me. They were trying to punish me. I called the attorney Emily had recommended, a woman named Laura Chin. Efficient, direct. I scanned and emailed the documents. She called me back 10 minutes later. They have no case, she said. No contracts, no documentation, no written agreements, nothing to prove any of this was a loan. This is textbook harassment. Can we counter? I asked. We could sue for damages, emotional distress, defamation. I paused. The idea didn't sit right. No, I said. I don't want their money. I just want them gone. There was a long silence on the line. Then Laura said, understood. I closed the folder, put it in a drawer, locked it. That weekend, I started packing, not just for Chicago, for a life that wouldn't include people who saw me as a checkbook in heels. The movers were scheduled for Tuesday. All weekend, I filled boxes with things I once thought I'd keep forever, cookbooks with my mother's handwriting in the margins, framed photos from holidays where I'd been the one behind the camera. I wrapped them carefully, then left most of them behind. Sunday morning, James called again. The number was unfamiliar. I picked up without thinking. You're really going to let me go to prison, he said. I'm not letting you do anything. I answered. You're going to prison because you committed crimes. His voice cracked. I could lose everything. I already have, I said. My family, my trust, my belief that you all cared about me as a person, not just a resource. Silence. I was scared, he said. I didn't know what else to do. You planned it. You laughed about it. You coached them on how to lie to me. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't think about me at all. He tried again. Caroline, please. I'm begging you. I already told you. Beg someone else. I'm done. I hung up, blocked the number. No more texts came. No more calls. They must have realized the door was shut. On Monday, I stood in the middle of my half-empty apartment and looked around at the life I'd built. Every inch of it earned, every dollar fought for, every piece touched by people who now felt like strangers. I didn't cry. Instead, I packed my last bag, zipped it shut, and taped a note to the front door for the movers. Chicago 2-bedroom facing the lake. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Not because everything was fixed, but because I wasn't pretending anymore. I found it in the back of a cabinet tucked behind old baking pans in a chipped pie dish I never used anymore. The lasagna pan, still clean, still heavy, the one I'd carried that Sunday night, full of warmth and hope and cheese, believing I was walking into love. I ran my hand along its edge. It was just glass and metal, but somehow it held everything. Every dinner I'd made, every time I'd tried every way they'd emptied me, and smiled while doing it. I didn't cry. I just picked it up, turned, and dropped it into the kitchen trash. The sound it made wasn't loud. At the airport boarding pass in hand, I got one last text from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was. Susan, I'm sorry. Not for needing help, but for how we planned to get it. You deserved better. I hope someday you can forgive us. I stared at it for a long time, then typed back. I hope someday you can deserve forgiveness. I turned off my phone and walked toward my gate. 6 months later, the message came through my lawyer. James had been sentenced 18 months in federal prison, tax evasion, wire fraud, attempted concealment of assets. My parents had sold their house to help cover his legal fees, lost most of it anyway. They were now living with my aunt in Texas. I didn't feel satisfaction, not guilt, not even anger. They were just names now. People I used to know in a life I no longer lived. In Chicago, the sky was always shifting gray, then silver, then something almost warm. I had a corner apartment with old brick walls and a view of the lake. I'd made friends, good ones, colleagues who valued me for more than my signature on a check. Sometimes on quiet Sunday mornings, I still made lasagna just for me. Not because I missed them, but because I remembered the girl who once believed bringing food was the same as bringing love. The girl who carried her heart in a casserole dish and left it on their doorstep again and again, hoping one day they'd hand it back whole. She was gone now. In her place stood someone different, someone who knew that love without respect is just debt in disguise, someone who understood that walking away wasn't giving up, it was remembering who you are. And sometimes the only person who ever really shows up for you is you. I used to think showing up was enough, that if I kept saying yes, kept giving, kept making casseroles and covering bills, eventually they'd see me, not just what I could offer. But some people only love you as long as you're useful. And the moment you stop giving, you stop existing. I didn't leave to punish them. I left to protect what was left of me. If you've ever stood outside a door with something warm in your hands and hope in your chest, only to hear the truth that breaks you, I see you. You don't have to explain why you stopped calling, why you didn't go home for the holidays, why you walked away. You don't owe anyone an apology for saving yourself. If you've ever been the one who gave quietly, just leave one word, you wish they had said to you, thank you. Caroline's journey in the story reveals a profound lesson about self-worth and the boundaries of familial love. Initially, she equates love with sacrifice, tirelessly giving her time, money, and heart to her family, believing it defines her role as a daughter and sister. The devastating betrayal she overhears her family plotting to exploit her financially shatters this illusion, exposing their view of her as a resource rather than a person. This painful clarity teaches Caroline that love without respect is merely a transaction, a debt disguised as devotion. She learns to prioritize herself not out of selfishness, but as an act of self-preservation, moving her finances and life to Chicago to escape their manipulation. By letting go of the naive girl who carried lasagna as a symbol of love, she embraces a stronger self who understands that true family honors mutual respect, not exploitation. Caroline's choice to walk away, leaving behind the casserole dish and the weight of unreciprocated giving, underscores her realization that sometimes the only person who truly shows up for you is yourself. This lesson empowers her to redefine love as something earned, not owed, and to protect her own worth above all.
The wedding planning meeting was held in my parents' living room on a Tuesday evening in March. I'd driven straight from work, still wearing my corporate attire, to discuss my sister Lily's upcoming June wedding. What I hadn't expected was to discover I wasn't invited to the actual event I was apparently financing. The venue deposit is $8,000, Mom said, sliding a folder of paperwork across the coffee table toward me. And the catering is running about $35 per person for the full package. I flipped through the contracts, noting the elegant letterhead from Rosewood Manor, one of the most expensive wedding venues in the state. The guest list showed 140 people. So we're looking at around 52,000 total, I said, doing quick math in my head. Plus flowers, photography, the band, Lily added from her spot on the couch next to her fiancé Marcus. But those are the big expenses. This is quite a bit more than we initially discussed, I said carefully. When Lily had first gotten engaged 8 months ago, the family had asked me to help out with wedding costs. At the time, they talked about a simple ceremony for 50 people with a budget around $20,000. We know it's a lot, Dad said, his tone suggesting the matter was already settled. But you're in the best position to handle it financially. I looked around the room. Mom and Dad both retired on fixed incomes. Lily working part-time at a boutique while finishing her master's degree. Marcus, a graduate student living on research stipends and student loans. And me, the corporate lawyer who'd been supporting various family members for the past 6 years. What are you and Marcus contributing? I asked. Lily shifted uncomfortably. Well, we're paying for the honeymoon. And Marcus is handling the bachelor party costs. How much is the honeymoon? About $4,000 for the week in Cancun. $4,000 for their honeymoon. $52,000 for the wedding I was expected to fund. And Mom and Dad? We're providing our expertise and emotional support, Mom said with the tone of someone who considered that contribution equivalent to tens of thousands of dollars. I see. I closed the folder of contracts. Can I think about it? Think about what? Lily asked, her voice rising slightly. Lisa, this is my wedding. It's the most important day of my life. I understand that. I'm just trying to figure out the logistics of covering $52,000. You make 6 figures, Dad said. This is what family does for each other. I did make 6 figures. I also had student loans, a mortgage, and a retirement account that had been raided multiple times for family emergencies over the years. Plus, Mom added, you'll get to be part of creating this beautiful memory for Lily and Marcus. Isn't that worth it? Speaking of being part of it, I said, where am I sitting at the reception? The room went quiet in a way that made my stomach drop. About that, Mom said carefully. We've been talking and we think it might be better to keep the guest list smaller. More intimate. Smaller. Just immediate family and very close friends, Lily said quickly. We want to keep it really personal, you know? I stared at her. I'm your sister. Of course you are. But you understand how expensive each person is. With catering at $35 per head, every invitation adds up. You're uninviting me to save $35? It's not about the money. It's literally exactly about the money. Marcus spoke up for the first time. We just want our wedding day to be about us, without any family drama or complications. What complications? Well, Mom said delicately, you have a tendency to be intense about financial things. We don't want that energy at the ceremony. I felt like I'd been slapped. Intense about financial things? You ask a lot of questions about budgets and expenses, Dad explained. It makes people uncomfortable. I ask questions because I'm the one paying for everything. And we're grateful, Lily said. But gratitude doesn't mean we have to invite everyone who contributes to the celebration. I looked around the room again, trying to process what I was hearing. They wanted me to pay $52,000 for a wedding I wasn't invited to attend. Let me make sure I understand, I said slowly. You want me to fund Lily's entire wedding, but I can't come to the actual event? You're making it sound worse than it is, Mom said. We'll have a nice family dinner afterward. Just the core family. The core family that apparently doesn't include me. Lisa, don't be dramatic, Lily snapped. This is my wedding. It's about me and Marcus, not about you. Then maybe you and Marcus should pay for it. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. That's not realistic and you know it, Dad said. They're students. They don't have that kind of money. Neither do I. You absolutely do. You just don't want to spend it on family. I stood up, gathering my purse and car keys. I need to think about this. There's nothing to think about, Mom said firmly. Family supports family. Your sister needs this and you're in a position to provide it. And in exchange I get excluded from the event I'm paying for. You're not being excluded, Lily said. You're just not invited to the ceremony part. But you'll be involved in all the planning and preparation. How generous. I headed for the door then turned back. Just so I'm clear, you want me to spend $52,000 on a party I can't attend, hosted by people who think I'm too intense about wanting to understand where my money goes? Lisa. I'll let you know my decision tomorrow. I drove home in a fog of anger and disbelief. In the past 6 years I'd paid for Mom's car repairs, Dad's medical bills, and Lily's last 2 years of graduate school tuition. Every time the justification was the same. Family helps family. But apparently, family doesn't include family when it comes to actually celebrating together. That night I called my best friend Claire and told her the whole story. They want you to pay for a wedding you're not invited to? Claire said. Lisa, that's insane. They're saying it's about keeping it intimate. Intimate enough to exclude the person paying for it? According to them, yes. What are you going to do? I'd been asking myself the same question all evening. Part of me wanted to tell them exactly what they could do with their intimate wedding. Another part of me felt guilty for even considering letting Lily down on her big day. I don't know, I admitted. Can I ask you something? Claire said. When was the last time anyone in your family did something significant for you without being asked? I thought about it. I can't remember. When was the last time they celebrated one of your achievements or milestones? Another long pause. My promotion to partner 2 years ago. They took me to dinner. Who paid for dinner? I did. Lisa, honey, do you hear yourself? The next morning I had an idea. I called the wedding venue and spoke with their events coordinator. I'm calling about the Martinez-Chan wedding in June, I said. I'm the one handling the financial arrangements. Of course, Miss Martinez. How can I help you? I need to understand your cancellation policy. She explained that deposits were non-refundable after 30 days. But final payments could be cancelled up to 72 hours before the event with a 20% penalty. And if the final payment is reversed after being processed? Well, that would be considered a breach of contract. We'd have to cancel the event immediately. I see. And how much notice would you give the wedding party? We'd call them as soon as we were notified of any payment issues. Perfect. I spent the next 2 months playing along with the wedding planning process. I attended cake tastings I wasn't invited to eat the cake at. I helped choose flowers I wouldn't see in person. I reviewed seating charts that didn't include my name. Every week there were new expenses. Lily needed a more expensive dress. The flowers had to be upgraded. The photographer required a bigger deposit. Each time they came to me with the additional costs and each time I smiled and agreed to cover them. The final bill came to $54,837. 3 days before the wedding I transferred the full amount to the venue. Then I called them back. This is Lisa Martinez. I just sent the final payment for the Martinez-Chan wedding. Yes, I see it here. Everything looks good. Great. I need to request a payment reversal. I'm sorry. I'm reversing the payment. All of it. There was a long pause. Miss Martinez, the wedding is in 3 days. If we don't have payment, we'll have to cancel the entire event. I understand. Is there some kind of problem with the charges? No, the charges are accurate. I'm just not paying them anymore. Can I ask why? I wasn't invited to the wedding I was paying for. So I've decided not to pay for it. Another pause. See. Well, I'll need to call the bride and groom immediately to let them know about the situation. Please do. I hung up and turned off my phone. 20 minutes later, I could hear the chaos starting from my apartment building's parking lot. Car doors slamming, voices shouting, multiple vehicles arriving at once. My family had come to stage an intervention. I let them knock on my door for 10 minutes before answering. Mom, Dad, Lily, and Marcus were all standing in my hallway, faces ranging from furious to panicked. "What did you do?" Lily shrieked. "I uninvited myself from paying for your wedding." "The venue called," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "They said you canceled the payment. The wedding is off." "That's unfortunate." "Lisa, this is insane," Dad said. "You can't just destroy your sister's wedding 3 days before the ceremony." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just not paying for something I'm not invited to." "We explained that to you," Mom said. "It's about keeping it intimate." "Then you should be able to keep the costs intimate too." Lily was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "How could you do this to me? This is the most important day of my life." "Then maybe you should have wanted me there for it." "We could have worked something out," Marcus said desperately. "Maybe we could add one more seat." "One more seat?" I stared at him. "I'm not some random +1 you're trying to accommodate. I'm the sister of the bride and the person who was paying for your entire wedding." "But the deposits," Mom said. "All that money is lost now." "Yes, it is. Money I spent on a wedding I wasn't welcome at." "You're being vindictive," Dad said. "I'm being practical. Why would I spend $54,000 on an event where I'm not wanted?" "Because you love me," Lily sobbed. "Because I'm your sister." "Am I your sister?" "Because sisters usually invite each other to their weddings." "This is ridiculous," Mom said. "Call the venue back right now and fix this." "No. Lisa. No. I'm done. I'm done paying for things I'm not included in. I'm done being the family item who's too intense to be included in celebrations." "But what about the guests?" Marcus asked. "People are flying in from out of state. Hotels are booked. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I was too problematic to invite." I started closing the door. "Wait," Lily called out. "What if we re-invite you? Would you pay for the wedding then?" I paused. "Are you inviting me because you want me there or because you need my money?" She couldn't answer. "That's what I thought." I closed the door and turned my phone back on. 18 missed calls and 43 text messages, all variations of angry demands that I fix the situation I'd created. I deleted them all and ordered Chinese takeout. The next morning, Lily showed up at my office. "I need to talk to you," she said, her eyes red from crying. "Okay. I'm sorry about not inviting you to the wedding. That was wrong." "Thank you. But Lisa, you have to understand. I can't just cancel my entire wedding. I've been planning this for 8 months. I'm not making you cancel anything. I'm just not paying for it." "But we can't afford it without you." "Then maybe you should have planned a wedding you could afford." Lily's composure cracked. "You're destroying my life because your feelings got hurt." "My feelings didn't get hurt. My eyes got opened." "To what?" "To the fact that you think my only value to this family is financial." "That's not true." "Really? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked about my life, my work, my relationships? When was the last time you wanted to spend time with me that didn't involve me paying for something?" Lily was quiet. "I've spent 6 years being this family's emergency fund. College tuition, car repairs, medical bills, and now a wedding. But I've never been invited to family dinners that I didn't pay for. I've never been included in family vacations I couldn't fund. And now I'm not even welcome at celebrations I finance. We do appreciate you. You appreciate my bank account. There's a difference." "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now you figure out how to have a wedding you can actually afford. Maybe a small ceremony in Mom and Dad's backyard. Maybe a potluck reception at the community center. Maybe something that reflects your actual budget instead of my income." "But I already sent invitations. Everyone's expecting this elegant celebration." "Then maybe you should have checked with your actual budget before sending invitations to an elegant celebration." Lily left my office and I didn't hear from my family for 2 weeks. Then Claire called me with interesting news. "I heard through the grapevine that your sister's wedding is back on," she said. "Really? Apparently your parents took out a second mortgage on their house to cover the venue costs." I felt sick to my stomach. "They did what?" $40,000 home equity loan. They're going to be making payments for the next 15 years. My parents, both in their 70s, had mortgaged their retirement security to fund Lily's dream wedding. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me felt vindicated. Mostly, I felt sad that they'd rather go into debt than admit they'd treated me unfairly. The wedding happened as scheduled. I saw the photos on social media. Beautiful venue, elegant flowers, happy couple surrounded by family and friends. I wasn't in any of the pictures, but then again I hadn't expected to be. 3 weeks later Mom called. "We need to talk about the mortgage payments," she said without preamble. "What about them? They're higher than we expected. We're going to need some help." I was quiet for a long moment. "Mom, you took out a mortgage to pay for a wedding I wasn't invited to. Why would I help you pay it back?" "Because we're family. Family that mortgaged their house rather than admit I deserved a seat at my sister's wedding." "Lisa, don't be petty. This is about your father and me losing our home. This is about you choosing Lily's wedding over your own financial security. We didn't have a choice. You had a choice. You could have told Lily to plan a wedding she could afford. You could have insisted that the person paying for the celebration be included in it. You could have chosen to treat me like family instead of just a funding source. But we didn't, and now we need help. And I don't have any help to give. I spent $54,000 on wedding planning before your daughter decided I was too intense to invite. That was my help. You got that money back when you canceled the payment. I donated it." "You what?" "I donated the entire amount to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. Kids who know what it's like to work for everything they get and still be treated like their success makes them responsible for everyone else's dreams." Mom was silent. "But congratulations on the beautiful wedding," I added. "I hear it was everything Lily dreamed of." I hung up and went back to the life I was building for myself. The life where I got to choose how my time, energy, and money were spent. The life where I was valued for more than my ability to write checks. 6 months later Lily called. "Lisa, I owe you an apology." "Okay." Mom told me about the mortgage payments. About how much they're struggling. "I see. I never thought about what would happen after the wedding. I just wanted everything to be perfect." "And was it perfect?" "The wedding was beautiful. But I keep thinking about how wrong it was not to include you." "What made you realize that?" "My friend Jennifer asked to see wedding photos, and when I showed them to her she asked where you were. When I explained that we'd kept the guest list small, she asked if that meant you hadn't helped pay for it." Lily paused. "When I told her you'd offered to pay but we'd decided not to invite you, she looked at me like I was the worst person in the world." "What did she say?" "She said that excluding the person who made the celebration possible was the cruelest thing she'd ever heard of." I didn't respond. "Lisa, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was so focused on having my perfect day that I forgot you were my sister first and my funding source never." "Thank you for saying that. Is there any way to fix this? Any way to make it up to you?" I thought about it. "You can start by paying your own bills. And Mom and Dad's mortgage payments." "I can't afford the mortgage payments. Marcus and I are barely covering our own expenses." "Then you can downsize your lifestyle until you can afford them." "But, Lily, you wanted an expensive wedding. You got one. Now you get to deal with the consequences of that choice. Are you ever going to forgive me?" "I already have. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were." "What does it mean?" "It means I hope you learn something from this experience. And I hope you don't make the same mistake with your marriage that you made with your wedding." "What mistake?" "Thinking that other people should sacrifice their security for your dreams." Today, 2 years later, my parents are still making mortgage payments on Lily's wedding. They've had to significantly downsize their lifestyle, and Dad has gone back to work part-time to cover expenses. Lily and Marcus divorced 18 months after their perfect wedding. Apparently, the financial stress of the mortgage payments led to fights about money, which led to blame, which led to the end of the marriage that was supposed to be worth any sacrifice. I've rebuilt relationships with extended family members who reached out after hearing the story. Most of them admitted they'd always wondered why I was expected to fund everyone else's celebrations while rarely being celebrated myself. I've also built new relationships with people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide financially. My birthday this year was celebrated with friends who insisted on paying for their own dinners and brought gifts they bought with their own money. It was small, personal, and filled with people who wanted to be there with me, not people who wanted something from me. It was everything Lily's wedding should have been but wasn't. A celebration of love, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about each other. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is refuse to enable other people's entitlement. Sometimes saying no to funding someone else's dream is the only way to protect your own dignity. And sometimes the best wedding gift you can give someone is teaching them that their dreams are their own responsibility to finance. The funeral home smelled like lilies and broken promises. I stood in the corner of the reception room, watching my family divide up my father's life like vultures picking at roadkill. Dad had been in the ground for exactly 3 hours, and they were already discussing who would get what. The house should go to Michael, Mom announced loud enough for everyone to hear. She was holding court near the guest book, surrounded by aunts and uncles who nodded along with whatever she said. He's got the family to think about and the mortgage payments won't be easy. Michael, my 32-year-old brother, stood next to his wife Sarah with their 2 kids tugging at his black suit. He looked appropriately somber, but I caught the satisfied gleam in his eyes when Mom mentioned the house. The family house. The Victorian 3-story that Dad had restored room by room over 20 years. The house that was supposed to be mine according to the will Dad had shown me just 6 months ago. Anna's doing well for herself, Mom continued, glancing in my direction. She's got her career, she's independent. She doesn't need the burden of a big old house. The burden. That's what she called the 3-bedroom home in the historic district that was currently worth $450,000. My Aunt Patricia nodded sympathetically. Michael does have those children to think about. It makes sense for the house to stay in the family with the grandkids. As if I wasn't family. As if Dad hadn't specifically told me the house would be mine because Anna's the one who'll take care of it properly. Besides, Mom added, her voice taking on that martyr tone she used when she wanted to sound noble, Anna's always been the strong one. She doesn't need the same kind of help Michael does. The strong one. Translation. The one we expect to sacrifice for everyone else without complaint. I watched Michael accepting condolences and subtle congratulations on his inheritance windfall. His wife Sarah was already talking to my cousin about redecorating ideas and whether they'd need to update the electrical system. They were planning their future in my house. Anna, honey, Mom called out, waving me over. Come here for a minute. I walked across the room, my heels clicking on the funeral home's polished floor. The family circle opened to include me, faces turned toward me with expressions that ranged from sympathetic to expectant. I know this is hard, Mom said, her voice gentle but firm. But we need to make some practical decisions about your father's things. She pulled a set of keys from her purse, the spare set Dad had given her years ago. The brass house key, the deadbolt key, the garage key, all hanging from a keychain with a photo of Michael's kids. These belong to Michael now, she said, pressing the keys into his palm. He's going to need time to get settled, figure out the mortgage situation, all of that. What about Dad's will? I asked quietly. Mom's expression tightened slightly. Your father wasn't thinking clearly toward the end. All that medication, the stress of being sick. We can't make major life decisions based on things he said when he wasn't well. He seemed pretty clear when I talked to him 3 weeks ago. Anna, Uncle Robert interjected, your mother's been taking care of the estate planning. She knows what's best for everyone. Michael has a family, Aunt Patricia added. You're young, you're successful, you have options he doesn't have. I looked around the circle of faces, all of them convinced they were being reasonable. All of them convinced that giving away my inheritance was somehow in my best interest. You understand, don't you? Mom asked, her tone suggesting that any other response would be selfish and inappropriate at my father's funeral. I could have argued. I could have mentioned the conversation I'd had with Dad just a month before he died, when he'd specifically told me the house was mine because I was the only one who truly appreciated what he'd built there. I could have brought up the updated will I'd watched him sign. Instead, I smiled and reached into my purse. Actually, Mom, I think there might be some confusion about the house. I pulled out a manila envelope and opened it carefully. Inside was a deed transfer document, officially notarized and filed with the county recorder's office. I had a long talk with Dad 2 days before he died, I said, unfolding the papers. He was very clear about what he wanted. The conversation had happened on Tuesday morning. I'd gone to see Dad in the hospital, expecting to find him weak and medicated. Instead, he'd been sitting up in bed, alert and determined. Anna, I need you to do something for me, he'd said without preamble. I need you to take ownership of the house right now while I can still sign the papers. Dad, you don't need to worry about that now. Yes, I do. His voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. Your mother's been talking about Michael needing the house, about how you don't need the help. She's going to try to override the will. I'd stared at him. Can she do that? If she contests it, if she gets Michael and everyone else on her side, it could tie things up in probate for years. And you know how these family fights go. You'd spend more on lawyers than the house is worth. Dad had already arranged everything. His lawyer was waiting in the hospital lobby with the deed transfer papers. All we needed to do was sign them and have them notarized by the hospital's notary public. This way the house is legally yours before I die, Dad explained. No will to contest, no probate to manipulate. It's just a simple property transfer between a father and daughter. What about Michael? What about Mom? Dad's expression hardened. Michael's 32 years old with a good job and a working wife. If he can't figure out his housing situation without taking yours, that's his problem. But Mom will be furious. Your mother's been managing this family's money and property for 40 years. She's forgotten that some things aren't hers to manage. We'd signed the papers that afternoon. Dad had insisted on paying the transfer fees and recording costs himself, writing a check from his personal account that couldn't be disputed or reversed. I'm tired of watching you get pushed around by people who think your success means you don't deserve help, he'd said. This house is yours. Take care of it. Now, standing in the funeral home, I watched my family's faces change as they realized what the papers in my hands meant. This is a deed transfer, I said calmly. Dad signed the house over to me on Tuesday. It's already been filed with the county. Mom snatched the papers from my hands, her eyes scanning the legal language. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. This can't be legal, she said. He was medicated, he wasn't thinking clearly. He was completely lucid, I said. The hospital notary can verify that. So can his lawyer who prepared the documents. Michael finally found his voice. You can't just take the house. We already made plans. You made plans for my house without asking me. It's the family house, Sarah said, her voice rising. It should stay with the family. I am family. You know what I mean, she snapped. With the children. With the people who need it. I looked at Sarah, 29 years old, employed full-time as a dental hygienist, married to a man with a steady income in construction management. They lived in a perfectly nice 3-bedroom ranch house that they'd bought 2 years ago. Why exactly do you need my father's house more than I do? We're growing out of our place, Michael said. With the kids getting older, we need more space. So buy a bigger house. We can't afford a bigger house in this market. But you can afford the mortgage payments on a $450,000 Victorian? Michael looked uncomfortable. We figured we'd pay it off with Mom's help. Of course. Mom would help Michael with mortgage payments on my house while expecting me to figure out my own housing situation independently. This is ridiculous, Mom said, waving the deed papers. I don't care what these say. That house has been in this family for 23 years. You can't just steal it. I didn't steal anything. Dad gave it to me. Your father wasn't competent to make that decision. Are you planning to have his mental capacity legally challenged? I asked. Because that would require proving he was incompetent when he signed these papers. Which would also invalidate every other legal document he signed during that time period, including his medical directives and the updates to his will. Mom's mouth opened and closed without sound. Plus, I continued, the hospital has documentation of his mental status assessments. He was evaluated by 2 different doctors on Tuesday morning and determined to be fully competent to make medical and legal decisions. I'd made sure of that. Dad had insisted on the mental competency evaluation before signing anything, specifically to prevent this exact challenge. Uncle Robert tried to play peacemaker. Anna, maybe we can work something out. Maybe you could sell the house to Michael at a family discount. Why would I do that? Because it's the right thing to do. Because family takes care of family. I looked around the room at these people who'd spent my entire adult life expecting me to be the giver, the helper, the one who sacrificed her own needs for everyone else's benefit. Where was this family takes care family energy when I was working 3 jobs to put myself through graduate school? Silence. Where was it when I was driving 4 hours every weekend for 2 years to help take care of Dad while Michael was too busy with the kids? More silence. Where was it when I spent my entire savings account helping with Dad's medical expenses that insurance didn't cover? Mom found her voice. That's different. How is it different? You were in a position to help. You had a good job savings. And now Michael's in a position to help himself. He has a good job and a working wife. Why can't he save up for a bigger house like everyone else? Because it's expensive and the market is expensive for everyone, including me. I took the deed papers back from Mom and returned them to my purse. The house is mine. Dad wanted me to have it and he made sure I got it legally and clearly. If anyone has a problem with that, you can take it up with the county recorder's office. This is going to tear the family apart, Aunt Patricia said dramatically. The family was already torn apart the moment you all decided I didn't deserve my own inheritance. That's not what we decided, Mom protested. Really? Then what did you decide? She couldn't answer. Michael stepped forward, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Fine. Keep your precious house. But don't expect any help from us when you need it. I almost laughed. When have I ever gotten help from this family when I needed it? We've always been there for you. Name one time. He couldn't. Name one time anyone in this room offered me financial help, emotional support, or even just basic consideration without me having to ask for it first. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. But you've all been there with your hands out when you needed something from me. Money for Michael's down payment. Money for Mom's car repairs. Money for Dad's medical bills. Time and energy and emotional labor whenever anyone had a crisis. I looked at each of them in turn. Now Dad left me something and your first instinct was to take that away too. Anna, Mom said, her voice breaking, you're being cruel. I'm being realistic. For the first time in my adult life. I turned to leave, then stopped. By the way, Michael, you'll need to return those keys. They don't work anymore. I had the locks changed yesterday. The look of shock on his face was almost worth 20 years of being taken for granted. I walked out of the funeral home and drove directly to my father's house. My house for the first time as the legal owner. It was exactly as Dad had left it. His coffee cup still in the sink from the morning he'd gone to the hospital for the last time. His reading glasses on the kitchen table next to a pile of bills he'd been reviewing. I sat in his favorite chair and cried for the first time since he died. Not just for losing him but for finally understanding how much he'd understood about our family dynamics. How clearly he'd seen the pattern of expecting me to give while giving me nothing in return. The new keys worked perfectly. Over the following weeks, my family tried various approaches to guilt me into changing my mind about the house. Mom called daily with updates about how devastated Michael's children were that they couldn't live in Grandpa's house. She sent me photos of their disappointed faces, as if their temporary sadness was more important than my permanent housing security. Michael's wife Sarah left voicemails explaining how unfair it was that I got to benefit from Dad's hard work when their children would remember this house forever from visits with Grandpa. Uncle Robert cornered me at the grocery store to lecture me about family values and how Dad would be so disappointed in my selfishness. Aunt Patricia started a family group chat where she regularly shared inspirational quotes about forgiveness and putting family first, clearly directed at me. But the most telling response came from my cousin Jenny, who called me 2 weeks after the funeral. I just wanted you to know, she said quietly, that I think you did the right thing. Really? Anna, I've watched this family treat you like an ATM for 20 years. You've paid for more family emergencies than anyone should have to handle. And the thanks you get is everyone expecting you to hand over your inheritance to. She paused. Also, I heard Mom talking to Aunt Patricia about their plan to manage your father's assets before the will was read. They knew exactly what they were doing. That explained the speed and coordination of the key passing ceremony at the funeral. They'd planned it in advance, expecting me to be too grief-stricken and socially pressured to object. 3 months after Dad's death, Michael and Sarah put their house on the market and bought a larger home in a different school district. Apparently, they'd had financing options all along. They just preferred the idea of getting my house for free. Mom gradually stopped calling about the mistake I'd made. She also stopped calling about much of anything else, which was actually a relief. The extended family drama faded as people got bored with taking sides in a dispute that had already been legally resolved. And I settled into life in my father's house. My house. It needed work, as old houses always do. I spent weekends learning to maintain the original hardwood floors Dad had refinished by hand. I researched historically appropriate paint colors for the exterior trim he'd been planning to update. I planted a garden in the backyard, something I'd never been able to do in the apartments I'd rented throughout my 20s and early 30s. Most importantly, I set up a home office in the room Dad had used for his woodworking projects. The space where he'd built furniture and repaired family heirlooms became the space where I started my freelance consulting business. Working from home in a space I actually owned, I was able to take on higher-paying projects and build the kind of professional reputation that would have been impossible while paying rent and commuting to someone else's office. Within 18 months, my income had increased by 40%. Dad had been right about more than just the family dynamics. He'd been right that I was the one who would take care of the house properly. Not just maintaining it but using it as a foundation to build something bigger. 2 years after Dad's death, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner in the dining room he'd restored. I invited the family members who had supported my decision to keep my inheritance. Cousin Jenny and her husband, Uncle David from Mom's side, and a few friends who had become chosen family over the years. Mom and Michael were not invited. It felt like the kind of holiday Dad would have wanted. People who actually appreciated each other gathered around his handcrafted dining room table, grateful for genuine connection rather than obligated attendance. During dessert, Jenny raised her glass for a toast. To Anna's dad, who was smart enough to make sure his house went to someone who would love it and use it well. To making hard decisions that protect your future, added Uncle David. To knowing the difference between family and relatives, I said, looking around the table at people who had chosen to support me rather than pressure me to give up what was rightfully mine. The house felt full in a way it never had during the obligatory family gatherings of my childhood, when everyone was present but nobody really wanted to be there. That night, as I cleaned up in the kitchen Dad had renovated, I found myself thinking about the deed transfer we'd signed in the hospital. "Thank you," I said out loud, not sure if I was talking to Dad or to myself. For the first time in my life, I had something that was completely mine. Something nobody could guilt me into sharing, something nobody could take away by appealing to family obligation. The house wasn't just 4 walls and a roof. It was proof that I deserved to receive, not just give. It was evidence that my needs mattered as much as anyone else's. Most importantly, it was a foundation, literally and figuratively, for building a life based on what I wanted rather than what everyone else expected me to provide. Dad had seen what I couldn't see for myself. That sometimes the most generous thing you can do is refuse to let people take advantage of your generosity. The Victorian house stands solid and beautiful, just like he knew it would. Just like he knew I would once I stopped giving pieces of myself away to people who never intended to give anything back. Some inheritances are money or property. Mine was the permission to finally put myself first. It turned out to be worth far more than $450,000.